Welcome back to the Street Parking Podcast. You guys, today I have with me here in the street parking office, not only was she street parking member number 1, she was literally the first person to officially join, but she is also on our nutrition team and is here with us this week. And I don't know when this podcast episode will come out, but is here with us this week recording a ton of new content for nutrition, for the app, and also just photos and resources and so much stuff. You've been here with EC and Molly this week. It is Michelle Brooks. Say hello, Michelle.
Hello.
And, I thought that this could kind of be a combination episode of getting to know Michelle because she lives in Canada near Toronto. What's the actual city?
Bracebridge. It's actually on the 45th parallel, so we have Santa's Village.
Oh.
Yeah.
She lives in the North Pole.
Yeah. Halfway to the North Pole.
Okay, so she's not here with us a lot, and so you don't maybe see her unless you've done some of the small group nutrition stuff, which she's super involved in all of that. But just getting to know Michelle as part of the nutrition team, as street parking member number 1, and also talking about our beliefs with nutrition and maybe some of the questions that she has experienced many times over now as she's been a part of our team and been involved in all of those small groups and the challenges and template questions and all of that, maybe asking some of those types of things as well. So we have a little combination episode, but let's get to know Michelle a little bit first. So you were the very first street parking member ever. We were talking about this at dinner last night.
Yeah.
Kind of tell how that happened.
Sure. So just a little backstory. So I started CrossFit in 2010, and that's where I met my husband, where we actually got engaged.
Yeah, that's right.
Middle of a bench press set. And so then we moved up to Bracebridge, where we live now, and there was no gym close by. We had a little bit of equipment. We kind of worked out from home, but didn't really follow any structured programs. I think I did some birth fit or something when I was pregnant with my oldest son, Jackson.
How old is he now?
He's going to be 7 this summer.
Okay.
So then after I had him and kind of got through the 6 weeks and the recovery and whatnot, I felt a little lost because I didn't know what to do, follow fitness-wise. I didn't really have a fitness community like I had when we were in the CrossFit gym. And so, I've followed you and Molly for years. So, when I first started getting involved in this, it was just like surreal. But, I remember when you started it and you guys said, oh, we're going to be starting memberships, sign up for the first of the year. And you said what day it was going to be registration. And I remember putting it in my phone. I'm like, yeah, this sounds like something that I can do. I can work out from home and follow a program. And so, yeah, my reminder went off and I signed up.
It was like the last week of December or something like that.
I think it was the 28th of December, 2016 was like the official date.
Yeah, and on our roster of members, she is the first person. She was the very first person to complete the sign-up process, at least.
Yeah.
And so when you started street parking, you were already had stuff at home and you were already somewhat accustomed to working out at home. How did that go for you? Following the program and everything, like what was it about what we were doing that it got you to where you are now, where you're a part of our team and you've been a member for, what is this going to be?
This is year 7,
wow.
Right? Is that right? Yeah,
yes.
I think so.
Yeah, yeah, we're on. It's funny that I don't even know that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the workouts were good. We had the Facebook group. It was building that community for sure. You and Julian, like, as you said, responded to every comment, every email, were super helpful. Again, being fairly newly postpartum, I was about 4 or 5 months.
That's right.
I was experiencing some challenges with getting into high intensity exercise again. And I was like, I'm gonna quit. This is not right for me because I didn't really get the whole customization.
What kind of problems were you having?
Pelvic floor, leakage.
Yeah,
very common, obviously, but didn't really know about that because I wasn't in those.
You just thought this is just my life now.
This is my life, and I
think so many moms think that.
Yeah, exactly. And so I remember reaching out to you again because you answered everything and said
I was street parking support.
Yeah, you are. Yep. And I said, I think I need to cancel. I'm still struggling. Maybe I'll be back. And you were like, no, let me help you come up with some modifications so you can still do these workouts. And I was just so impressed with how much you could care about one individual. And then I continued to see and still to this day, how much you all care about all of the members, that it just like, it hooked me. And so, I mean, I think I took you up on that like a couple times, and then I was like, all right, I can do
then
this.
You understood more like the concept of like, I can change things that I need to change. Because so many people come, especially I would say back then, we had so many people come in from mostly CrossFit back then. We have people from all over different types of fitness now, but most everybody that joined in the beginning came from CrossFit because they followed me or they followed Julian. And the concept of like, just change the movement was like, well, I can do that. I'm allowed. Like we still see it sometimes. Like, am I allowed to do that? It's like, no one's gonna come over and stop you, you know. Or we encourage it if it's gonna get you to move, you know. So
and the whole, you know, being stuck on the RX and it's not really what, you know, because it's on the leaderboard and I can't compare myself, and like having that restriction and feeling like you're in a box. But you guys kind of unraveled that for everybody. So
Okay, cool. And then Molly did the first nutrition challenge for us, and I think it was in the fall of 2017. So like
which
a year
I signed
later.
up for.
Did you ask you, did you participate in that?
And I did one-on-one coaching with her. And I think before the challenge started, I had already kind of gotten back to my air quotes pre-baby weight. But was still like wanting to make more improvements, and I was like, okay, I need some help, and so I did work with her one-on-one and did the challenge, and I think it was like, I remember it was those spreadsheet challenges.
Oh yeah,
we had to take like a screenshot and
it was
send
all very rudimentary. I mean, we're still making improvements, but yes, everything was very.
I mean, they've come so far since that first challenge, but. I've been involved in every single challenge. Yeah.
What was obviously you're on the nutrition team now, and we can talk about like the education that you've gone through more recently, but what was your involvement in or education with nutrition at that point? Had you started any of it yet?
Yeah.
Or did that path start because you became more interested in it through street parking?
So a little history again. When I finished university in 2003, I was 250 pounds. And
I think you've shared pictures with us of this. Yes.
Yeah. I just was like, did not value fitness, health. Like I kind of wanted to eat what I wanted, and just was like not a overly healthy individual, but had blinders on for several years because I didn't realize I had gotten that big. I was in a situation where the person I had dated through university and I broke up, and I was like, okay. Then I just suddenly realized like, okay, I'm in this situation, and what I got to do something. So I started learning about losing weight, obviously, following all the fad diets, learning about fitness, having trainers, I feel like I've done every diet, every workout sort of regime.
I think that's good though when you become a coach to have tried a bunch of different things. I talked to EC about this because we did an episode with her too, where one of the reasons that I love hearing her thoughts about things is because I've seen her, because I've known her for a long time. I've seen her go down some very strange rabbit holes. Yeah. But I think like going down that path and then coming back from it, you are able to share those experiences with other people and be a much better coach. So that's... Yeah.
So when I was on maternity leave, because in Canada we have 12 to 18 months.
Don't tell everybody that, Michelle. People are going to...
Come live with us. No. I decided that I was going to get some nutrition coaching certifications. I feel like as much as when I finished university, I was like, I'm not going to do any more education.
What did you go to university for?
So I went in because I wanted to follow a medical profession.
Okay.
That didn't go very well. And then I ended up in a math and statistics field, and I am also an actuary, which...
She's our spreadsheet person for all of you guys. When we need a really good spreadsheet with like formulas and stuff, it's like somebody call Michelle because...
So I ended up doing 10 extra years of like,
oh my gosh,
post-secondary like designation schooling and stuff. So so even when I was done that, I was like, I'm not going to do any more education. But then I was like, well, but maybe.
I mean, we always like to learn.
Yeah. So I did the precision nutrition level 1. And then I wanted to start experimenting with my friends and family and see kind of like how I could help them, because I've had coaches. I wanted to shorten the time between when I had my realization, it was 2003. At that point, it was 2016. I want to help people shorten that gap to get to a healthy, to become their best selves.
Okay. Cool. All right. So you said that you've done pretty much every street parking challenge, right? I think one of the things that I would like to ask you today, because let me backtrack. I got Molly involved with doing the nutrition stuff because I personally, as a coach, I am confident in what people need nutritionally, and but it's a lot to take on with the emotional side that people have. And it's not that I mean, I guess maybe saying I don't want to do it sounds like I don't care about people. It's more that I was doing so much that adding that layer into it, I knew that I wouldn't be able to give it what it needed. So I was like, Molly, hey, you want to like come do this nutrition? And because quite honestly, I felt ill prepared to do it because I don't really cook. Like, I'm not a recipe person, and I know that that's like valuable for a lot of people. And Molly's like, let me just whip something together really quick. And she's just so good at that sort of thing. So she has a little bit more resources as far as that stuff goes. And so obviously she was my best friend, and I knew all of that about her, and I knew how smart she was with it and how well she could do with it. Where was I going? Okay, so now you guys on the nutrition team, what I would like to ask you is, we keep nutrition simple at Street Parking the same way that we do the workouts. We value our members having freedom and giving them tools, not telling them do this and it's black and white and you have to follow it exactly, but like, hey, here's some guidelines and some tools, but make it work for you. And consistency is the most important thing over perfection. All of the messaging from the fitness carries over.
Absolutely.
What would you, and I didn't tell you I was this podcast came like very last minute.
Totally
So I haven't given you time to prepare or anything. So this is going to be definitely off the top of your head. And I'm sure when we're done, you'll say, oh, I forgot this one thing. What are some of the most common struggles? Maybe not specific questions, but what are people struggling with the most in our community when it comes to nutrition?
Sometimes where to start.
Okay.
Because, well, we've talked about this before, consistency is not sexy, like easy, simple things is not sexy. And then there's all this stuff in the fitness industry of try this really hard, complex, multiple rule framework. And then they're like, well, that's too much, but this is not enough. Like, they don't believe that doing something small consistently and then building on that will be more successful in the long run. So they just don't know where to start. And that's kind of the questions that I see a lot. We get, direct emails from members, and we see posts that they just don't know where to start. So they get paralyzed with decisions.
If you could give like one kind of blanket tip, because you don't know each individual person's situation, obviously, that's listening or whatever. If you could give one blanket tip for somebody who maybe is like, I just don't know where to start, what would that one-liner suggestion be?
Eat enough protein.
Oh, awesome. And then their next question is going to be like, how much is enough?
Yeah, exactly.
For most women, would you say that you could keep it as simple as you're probably not? Like men are a little bit different. They tend to, not all men obviously, but they tend to gravitate more toward meat and do better with protein.
I would agree.
But like just more than you're having now, probably.
Absolutely.
Make sure there's some at every meal.
Yeah.
Start there.
Yeah.
Before even worrying about how many grams it is and weight and all of that, just if it's not already present in every single meal, make sure that it is.
Are you having it in every meal? If so, how much are you having? Like, the best is, well, what are you having? Well, I have like an egg with breakfast. I'm like, okay, like what else? Well, toast and whatever. Okay, so
I mean, you're describing my mom completely. I'm just like, Mom. She's like, well, I put some protein powder in my smoothie once a day, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. Or she's probably listening to this. Sorry, Mom, but she was like, they had pizza the other night. She's like, well, I had some like pepperoni on it, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. Okay, we need to get you some more protein. You're a 70-year-old woman. You need your protein.
Absolutely.
Do you find that people? I found this a lot when I was working the seminars with CrossFit. And maybe that's why I didn't want to take on nutrition. I just had already heard the questions way too many times. That often there's just a lack of understanding about what food is
What category?
in what category.
Yeah,
So like,
yeah.
for example, well, I have peanut butter and that's their like protein. And it's not that peanut butter doesn't have protein in it, but it's mostly actually fat. Do you find that that's still the case now?
Oh yeah. There's still what is considered protein? And I mean, there's just so many things that people don't even really realize. But yeah, peanut butter being protein source is definitely still a good one out there.
Still out there. It's still out on the radio waves.
Yes.
And that's the thing, I think, where it comes down to, if I could give like a blanket statement, and I've talked about this on podcasts before, but it's don't be so impatient that you're not willing to learn along the way. You know what I mean? Like the very first step, if you want like lifelong, whether it's fitness or nutrition success or whatever, is actually learn why things are working or why it doesn't work, or what is protein, what is carbohydrate, what is fat. I remember I used to eat pretty strict paleo like a long time ago, and I had sent my mom, sorry mom, we'll bring it up mom again, but she's somebody who like she just never knew, and so I sent her a picture of my breakfast, and it had like fruit and eggs and some like chicken sausage and some, like almond butter or whatever. And she's like, well, you're not eating any carbs, because in my mom's mind, they weren't carbohydrates.
Right.
And so what she meant was starchy carb, but like learning all of that stuff, I think, and we try to do that through, that's what those small groups are for, and the challenges and all the content that you guys put out. And I know that I'm sure that there'll be a lot of that education in the new stuff you guys are creating.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, some people maybe use that, like not educating themselves as a bit of a barrier. Well, I don't know, and so like ignorance is bliss.
Yes.
Because when you know something, then you have to make that decision, and then it's your fault if you do or don't do something.
Yes.
Like those cookies from Panera or like Starbucks. You're like, oh my gosh, those are 400 calories. But if you didn't know that, this is probably 150 calories. Ignorance. Like probably.
And I find that so interesting because I make the joke sometimes about people know more about like Kim Kardashian's outfits than they know about how their own body works. Like it's crazy to me what people will spend their time learning about. Yes. And it's not that that's not interesting maybe to some people, but what could be more important than knowing how your own body works, right? And that becomes even more true when you're like trying to conceive or pregnant or now raising humans. Like you also want to know how their body works. Well, for the most part, their body works the same as yours. And so let's actually learn, or people can go fix a car and know all the parts and pieces, but they don't know that about themselves, which is so interesting to me. And if you can think about it that way and just be patient and take the time to learn. What are some of the most, so eat enough protein would be like your blanket. Most people, they just don't get enough. And that's going to make a huge difference.
Absolutely.
What are some of the most common questions then from beginners, aside from, well, what counts as protein?
Yes.
And it doesn't have to necessarily be template. It can just be nutrition in general.
Well, I think a common thing that I hear personally with people I know or just through the members is, how can I stop night eating or like binging or like things? And I feel like if people just ate more in general or ate earlier in the day and like made time for it, like prepared their food and made sure that they stop whatever they're doing and eat some food, then they're not just so hangry at the end of the day that they just eat whatever they want. And then get in this cycle, and then they feel bad.
Ate more than an egg for breakfast.
Yes, exactly. At least 3 eggs. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And what is, if you had a blanket answer for that, it sounds like just eat more throughout the day. Specifically, probably protein and maybe a little bit more fat, depending on what it is that you're eating, or less processed foods too, like things that are going to fill you up a little bit more.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is something that I've even learned over the past several years, because I feel like I've evolved my own nutrition and coaching knowledge over the past 7 years. And where was I going? The whole like additive approach is better than a restrictive approach. So things like, with EC as inspiration, adding fruits and vegetables, and then saying, hey, I still can eat a cookie or whatever. Not saying I'm not allowed to have that, because that's that whole don't push the red button.
Most diets are what you're taking out.
Yeah. So like adding in fuel to get your workouts, to have a good mood, have energy, sleep well, all those kind of things will lend itself to doing less of the unfavorable things that you want to avoid.
Yeah, I mean, we've already talked about two things right there that could like radically change nutrition and like start seeing results and everything. For a lot of people is make sure there's protein at every meal. Don't change anything else. Like eat exactly what you're eating. Just make sure that there's protein along with it. And then, okay, second, add a fruit or a veggie to every single one of those things.
Yeah.
And you don't have to change anything else. Just eat the protein. And this is usually what we try to do like with our boys. It's like eat the protein first. And then you can have whatever you want after that, because it's going to fill them up a little bit, and then they're less likely to just like hammer chips or
100%. No,
and all of us are less likely now to hammer that stuff.
Absolutely.
So those two things, without weighing anything, without measuring anything, like and it's those things that you're saying, like people, that sounds too simple. Like I need to be told down to the gram how much, I talked about on EC's podcast, a friend of ours, he used to literally weigh his protein powder like on a food scale before he would mix it. Like people think that level of precision is what's needed. No. And I've talked about this before too, that is a built-in, people almost want it to be that complicated, because if it is that complicated and if it is that much work, then they can't possibly be expected to do it.
No,
I couldn't be expected to do stuff like, with 3 kids and the business and everything. So when I think people hold on to that belief, because as soon as, like you're saying, that it's not true, and it's just like, hey, maybe try eating some fruits and veggies and some protein. Now I'm responsible for doing that. And if I don't, the only person that
can blame is yourself.
You can blame is yourself. Do you find that a lot?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Do you guys ever have people that get downright like angry when they have that realization?
I don't think
Not like
so.
I mean, we've all had we've had people that are angry when they cancel their memberships or whatever here and there because of their own personal whatever they have going on in their life. Like, do you guys see that much with the nutrition
They
stuff?
usually just don't reply if we send sort of one of those.
Like, hey, have you actually tried eating the protein before asking for specific,
Yeah, and I mean, we don't keep track of, I didn't hear back from this person. It's just sort of like, no, that didn't happen. Or you see recurring questions from the same person several months later asking a slightly different version of the same question they asked previously. And like, hey, guess what? We can search to see if you emailed us before and what questions were asked. So
just copy and paste the same answer from before.
As per my previous email.
That was another thing that you see a lot when it comes to nutrition is people in a direct way or in a roundabout way asking for permission.
Yeah.
Like they want you to say it's okay for you to still have your 5 Oreo cookies every night. Because if you say it and then they don't see the results, it's your fault, not theirs,
absolutely.
right? So how do you guys deal with the asking permission? Because that's the same thing that we see in the workouts, right? It's like, am I allowed to use the 20-pound dumbbells? And it's like, you're allowed to do whatever you want. Are you capable of using the 25s though? Because we would encourage you to push yourself to something that's uncomfortable, but and it's no different than with the nutrition. So how do you guys deal with those asking permission questions?
Yeah, so I think it's tied to outcomes, right? So it's sort of all, is this working for you? Like can I have those 5 Oreos? Like, well, I guess so. Like,
how's it going?
How is it going? Are you asking because you're not getting the results that you want and you want to see if there's a way to still continue to do that?
Right.
Or what? So I think we always just say, if that's working for you, keep doing it. And that's usually a response we don't get much of a follow-up to.
Yeah, and I think, we've done some blogs and some podcasts and some social media posts about like, well, how do I know if it's working for me? And most people attach it to one thing. And this is something that EC and I talked about in her episode too. They're only attaching it to weight or body fat percentage. Those are probably the 2 most common, where we encourage people to measure success in more than just that. It's not that you can't use that. Both of those things can be a great measure, BMI, like whatever. but not if it's the only measure of success. And so we encourage people at Street Parking to measure, how is this impacting your overall health? Well, it's like, how do I know? Well, we go to the doctor, and you can ask for blood work and keep track of that stuff. Or you can, I mean, I've even done that through like Inside Tracker, and I do it on my own. And I can track that. It's an important thing to track. How is it impacting your quality of life? Like, if those 5 Oreos are making you a happier person, I would maybe look into why that is. But you know what I'm saying? Like, if having a glass of wine with your husband every Friday night is a big deal for you, and that's a huge like moment for you guys, then I would say that, then you should maybe keep it in, or whatever it might be.
Right.
How is it sustainable what you're doing? You know, all of those things. So there's way more. And how is it impacting your performance and your energy levels and
your sleep, your mood,
yes.
everything.
So making sure that you're in some way, and you could be Michelle about it and make a spreadsheet and track all those things, or just being aware of it. And maybe you have a performance in a workout where you're like, man, I just felt like I had nothing. Go back and look and see if you've made any changes, or maybe you take the Oreos out, and all of a sudden, you know, some changes happen, positive or negative. Just pay attention to those. And that's what you're saying is like, I don't know, can you? Because what are your goals, and how is that impacting all of that stuff?
No, exactly. And being an experiment yourself is really good. I still continue to do that. I remember last summer when I think you shared about the Huberman podcast about alcohol, and I was like, I am not listening to that, because I do not need to hear that
members that are like,
negativity in my life.
It's like what you're saying, though. As soon as I listen to this, I'm responsible for knowing that information.
Exactly. And so I listened to it a few months later, and I was like, you know, it's good information. You know, it's not really surprising.
And he doesn't present it in a way that's emotional.
No.
It's very factual.
And so over the past 6 months, I've actually really experimented with, let's take it out. Is my sleep going to be better? Is my body composition going to be better? And like, I am seeing really positive things from that. And I'm like, okay, so now I'm making these, you know, decisions and weighing them back and forth. And so like, I really encourage people to experiment with things and know that it's going to take some time. You're not just going to get one day of, I skipped my drinks and I didn't feel any better the next day. So
I would say that's the one that I've seen people get angry about, is when in challenges we've done like no alcohol. We usually don't do that anymore because people get
really mad.
And you know, we used to answer that question, and this could be applied to anything, not just, you know, if it's that hard for you not to do it, like maybe that's the reason that you should. And I could say that with myself about coffee. You know what I mean? Like if I'm getting angry at the challenge because for a month I'm being encouraged to like give something up, maybe I need to reassess my attachment to that. And that's what we encourage people to do whenever they have like this emotional response to something. Is like dig into that a little bit deeper, because it's not about the coffee. I mean, I joke about around with my coffee that it's like my emotional support coffee that I just have with me all the time. I don't even drink that much of it, to be honest. So
and actually, you know, you had asked about the nutrition education we've had in last year. Molly and I and Jen did the PN level 2. And what was really interesting was some tactics that we learned there, the whole motivational interviewing. And like, I feel like how we respond and interact with members has changed a lot since doing that, because it's asking a lot more of those questions. Well, why do you feel that having your coffee is so necessary? Why do you feel like you have to have that sweet after your lunch? Or I just did that with one of my best friends the other day, and she's like, you know, that's a really good question. You know, so it's great to have people come to realizations themselves, as opposed to, like you said, no, you cannot have this. Because then that'll stick a lot better.
Yeah, absolutely. What was I going to ask you? How much, okay, this is what I was going to ask you. How much of what people struggle with then, because you just said, like, we look into that, like, emotional attachment, or It doesn't, and that doesn't have to be like in a negative way, like, oh, you're addicted to alcohol, so you refuse to give it. And that's not what we're saying at all. No. It's more just like, hey, this is something that's like, for some reason, you're really attached to it, right? And it could be what you eat for breakfast, or that you don't eat breakfast. Like you have something in your mind that tells you that I'm just not a breakfast person, and you get very attached to that identity. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like any sort of like sugar addiction or anything like that. How much of what people struggle with nutrition is emotional versus physical? Because like, you know, people think, oh, I'm going to go on this diet, I'm going to be hungry, I'm going to be this and that. But I feel like 80% of the struggle is more identity, attachments,
Agreed.
like things like habits and that sort of thing, as opposed to any sort of physical challenge that it actually is.
Yeah, no, I think it definitely has more to do with the emotional side of thing, and that identity, and we keep coming back to that in our small groups and our challenges and stuff like that. Like that identity is so powerful. You know, I am the type of person that has a glass of wine every time I come home. You know, changing that to be, I'm the type of person that goes for a walk when I come home from work to de-stress or spend time with my family. And like knowing that it's okay to change your identity. You don't have to, you know, well, this is the way I am. Well, that's, you know, a closed mindset. Being open to change and knowing that that can bring you down positive paths.
I think one of the toughest parts about that is if other people around you also have your identity as that. Like, so maybe your husband and your husband or partner or whatever have the wine together, but you're like, well, I kind of don't want to be drinking wine every day anymore. Like, I want maybe just cut it down to a couple times a week. But now that person's like, well, what about our time, and what about me and this? And that's a struggle that we see a lot.
For sure. And I mean, I'm very, very lucky that I have an extremely supportive spouse. He doesn't do that at all. But I know that is a reality. Yeah, I know that's a reality, and it is challenging, and I try and, you know, help members when they reach out with those things. Personally, the whole drinking thing, what I've done is I have non-alcoholic drinks, so I'm still have something. You're still
little mocktails
participating in that activity, because that's better for me than the actual drinking.
Yeah. Where was I going to go next with this? Oh, the other thing that I think is important to talk about is going back to people thinking that it needs to be a lot more complicated than it does, and almost wanting that to be true so that they're off the hook. It's very similar to like the more than nothing mantra that we have. It's like, well,
Absolutely.
You could have done you could do something. Like, tell me you actually couldn't have done 5 minutes of burpees and air squats. Like, 99% of the time you could have done something. And it's not to make people feel guilty or anything. It's just letting them know that that's enough. And that doing that consistently is going to get you further than skipping any day that you don't have an hour to work out, right? And so I think recognizing seasons and stages, whether that's a week or a month or a year, where you're just like, I probably could realistically be getting better results if I was doing the template as opposed to maybe balanced plate, because it would be more precise and it would be this and that. But if I can't do that consistently, the balanced plate is a better option than just saying, well, I can't do that at all, so I'm just going to keep eating, you know, my fast food and my pizza, like all this stuff, because I can't do the template. I want to do the most hardcore thing or nothing at all. How often do you see that being the problem?
Yeah, no, definitely. I see that a lot, and that's actually something we address in small group coaching a lot, is building that nutritional toolbox of the spectrum of even day to day, week to week.
Yeah. It's not necessarily like, oh, because I have young kids, so for the next few years, this is going to be a struggle. It could be like, oh, well, for this 2 weeks that I'm out of town, I can fall back on something more simple. Yeah,
exactly. No, it's definitely a fairly black or white, on or off still. And like, that's the fight that we keep trying to fight and educate about.
And I see a lot of times, actually, I saw a comment on a post today that was from a member who, actually, I don't know if she was a member or not, because it was on the public Instagram, but she said that she'll never weigh and measure her food, that she knows what her body needs. And I didn't respond, but I kind of wanted to respond with like, hey, if that's working for you, if you are that in tune with your body, and that's great. And I find that we see a lot of times people have an aversion to weighing and measuring of any sort, because maybe they have a history with like eating disorders, or they're worried about that, and that's where I think the spectrum of what we offer too, it's like, yeah, if somebody tells you guys, I have an issue with, maybe I used to count every single calorie and I can become obsessive, then you're not going to suggest the template for that person.
Absolutely.
But giving them, hey, but you can still do something and pay attention to it. So how do you guys address, because I think that I have seen that question come up several times in the group.
Yeah, so how do we address,
like if somebody's
says,
like, well, I know I need to eat enough protein, but if I start counting things, I become obsessive. And so they're almost, they'll stay away from learning about nutrition or trying to
so I think that's where we would just say, like, okay, how would you feel about using your palm to benchmark your protein or your servings, or just balancing your plate? Like, kind of asking the questions like, do you think that this would be okay for you, or what would you feel comfortable? So again, just going down that exploration.
Yeah, and obviously I know that you guys suggest, like, hey, anybody that hasn't been treated for that, if it was a legitimate like eating disorder, you should definitely go to some like professional help for that. But don't think that, I guess what I'm trying to say is, don't think that you need to be super precise, or that we want to send anybody who has that sort of tendency down that road. We wouldn't encourage that.
No.
But that doesn't mean that you can't fall back on some of the more simple tools. And that those are, I mean, people like, oh, like the palm method. I don't know if you guys have ever done this, but I've known some people in the past that actually they measured out it might have been Zone that they did this with. I don't know that it was a street parking thing. But they measured out their like zone blocks, and then they did the palm method next to it, and it was almost identical what the servings came out to be for them. Yeah. And so it's a lot more accurate than you think. And for those of you guys that don't know what palm method is, it's basically using your hand to measure the serving size for different things. So like the size and thickness of your palm would be like your protein serving, for example. And it turns out that our hand size, maybe not for every single person, but our hand size typically mimics the size of our body. Men have bigger hands than women, usually, not always. Yeah. And so it works pretty well. It's like a pretty accurate measure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so keeping it simple. And then if you don't even want to be the person at the restaurant, like looking at your hand next to your chicken breast, it's just like, okay, then just make sure your plate is balanced and you've got protein and veggies or fruit and some carbs and some fat on there, and that's it. Yeah. And the main thing that people are missing most of the time is just that protein serving.
Absolutely.
What are some other what are some of the funnier, and not to make fun of anyone or anything, so don't choose just one person that's going to know for sure that you're talking about them, but like commonly asked, but like, how are these people coming up with this questions?
Oh man. As he said, he didn't have much time to think about this.
I'll give you some, because Molly always shares with me some of the, like, and this again might just be like asking permission, where people are really reaching for, they're trying to make what they're already eating fit into what we are hoping for them. So like the veggie straws, like, do those count as my vegetables? Yeah. Stuff like that. Yes. When the person knows. I mean, they know. Yeah, if you have to ask. Most of the time, they know. Yeah. Yes.
If you have to ask.
Some of my favorite ones when we've done alcohol in challenges is we'll say like 1 drink a week or something like that.
Yeah, how big is that drink?
To get full points, they'll be like, well, what about a 40? And it's just like, and we put it back on them like, well, do you think a 40 is one drink? One drink? And we're not going to come and like, what are we going to do? Yeah. Like, this isn't, it's just, this is a challenge to help you improve, not... There's nothing for us to gain from you following it or not following it. What are some of the funnier questions around like that sort of stuff? We get a lot about what counts as water. A lot about what counts as water.
Oh my gosh, I wish I could.
I'm like hitting all of them because I just laugh at all of them. One of the things that I was talking to EC about on her episode is people thinking that timing is this huge
so important.
Yeah. How would you encourage people to worry less about that? Or what's like a blanket statement that you could put out about like how important meal timing is? Or can I I joked around in EC's episode about Oprah making some comment in like the 80s or 90s about how you should never eat past 5 p.m. And I feel like our generation is still latched onto that heavily.
Yeah, so I think that comment ties to the whole night eating, right? Like if you decide if you say I'm not going to eat past 5 p.m., then you're maybe less likely to eat like those snacks that you would normally eat at that time. But
so it's not, if somebody does that and they lose weight, to be clear, it's not because the time of day that they're eating, it's that they're eating less calories because they've cut out a whole window of time where they would normally eat.
Yeah, so that's like the time restriction.
It's not because, I mean, if you shifted all the calories and all of them were at night, but it was the same amount of food, you would have the same response.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, I know intermittent fasting is very popular, but again, it's not that the fact that you're only eating between 12 and 8 or something that is the magic. It's that you're eating the right amount of calories for you to have some fat loss, and it's just working for you. You're just doing it over a more condensed period of time. So yeah, in terms of timing, I think, and this comes to awareness about your body and being aware of your hunger cues. And I don't think people are really tuned into that. I think the timing matters when your body needs it. Like, eating until you're about 80% full, and then, 3-ish, 4 hours later, or, when you're starting to feel like you're hungry again. Like that is what timing matters, right? Is when your body tells you. But learning that and undoing these whole, like, I have to wait so long before eating, and those old habits can be hard to break. But trying to bring some awareness. And that's why, we did the mindfulness challenge last fall. We had the whole, put down your fork and chew and don't have any distractions, like to try and teach people to be more tuned in to what's going on with their body.
Yeah, I feel like people too, there's this expectation, and this isn't necessarily something I just see in street parking, it's just like on social media or whatever in general. People have this idea that there shouldn't have to be any effort involved. There's the group that thinks that it should be really, really, really hard. Yeah, for sure. But then there's the group that thinks that, like, my body should just know what to do, and I should just know, and I shouldn't have, like, it shouldn't be this hard for me to lose weight. It shouldn't be this hard for me to change my habits. When it's like, you're asking your brain to, like, rewire kind of. And EC has some really great episodes about our bodies are born, and I believe this, and I see it with my boys, intuitively knowing when they're hungry and what they need and what they want to eat and when they're full. I see that with them. But the reality is that our, like, modern food environment isn't set up for those cues to work well for very long, because if you start eating, like, super processed food that's very easy to overeat and doesn't fill you up, like, all of those signals start getting messed up, and you eat that way your whole life. You have to, like, completely it's no different than, like, I want to stop picking at my fingernails. Like, I have to, like, be very conscious and pay attention to it for a very long time. Yeah. But you do get to a certain point where you actually don't really have to think about it anymore. Yeah. And that's what people get frustrated with me, even Julian, because, like, I don't have an emotional attachment to food. I don't really think about it. I'll eat the same thing all the time. And I don't think that it's because I'm different. I think it's because I've been consistent for so long. Yeah. If you can go through the phase of learning and being and measuring stuff to the extent that is good for you, and doing things like putting down your fork, being super aware of your cue, like. And I'm saying this probably takes a couple years of you, like, really focusing on learning all of this stuff. Once you're through that, it's actually the most freeing thing ever, because your whole day isn't caught up in thinking, what am I going to eat? What am I allowed to eat? What's going to impact me? Like, it becomes a part of I use the example all the time. You just brush your teeth. Like, I just grab the ground turkey and the apple and the cashews, if that's all I have. And there's, like, very little thought that goes into it. Yeah. But you have to go through the learning process first.
It's the whole atomic habits thing, right?
Yes.
Like building the automaticity, right? And it's the same thing with fitness. I get up at 4:45 every day to work out. Right. Weekends, daily. Like, I rarely sleep in. And because I'm like, I know that's when I'm going to get my workout, and I don't have to think about what I'm going to do later on.
If I tried to do that, aside from that, my kids still don't sleep. But, like, if I'm used to working out in the evening, for the first however long,
yeah.
3-6 months maybe, that would feel really hard for me.
Yep.
Because it's just new. Like anytime something's new, I would have to, it's a rewiring. It's a like, okay, this is just what I do now.
Yep.
It would take a while for that to become part of who I am.
Again, it goes back to the identity as well, right?
And people just, the patience, I would say, is the struggle.
Yeah.
And maybe, again, using only one measure for success. Where it's like, oh my gosh, I had protein at all my meals today and it wasn't like this huge struggle. Like that's a measure of success. Or
Absolutely.
like, oh, I automatically, like my shopping list, I don't have to write it down because I know what to get now. Like that's a measure of success. So,
Yeah.
I mean, just like with fitness, encouraging people to actually just allow it to take the time that it needs to take and develop habits and know that some effort is better than no effort, and all of that I think is so huge. What's your biggest struggle when it comes to nutrition? Currently.
So you caught me in a really good point right now.
Okay.
Just like in the past couple months, like I said, I've given up alcohol. Not forever.
Yeah. Are you completely off of it?
Yeah. I've got my habit tracker.
How often were you drinking before?
It was about probably every weekend.
Okay.
I really enjoy day drinking, like having like about 4 or 5 throughout a day.
Okay.
And just like I really enjoyed the
Like
taste.
on a Saturday or a Sunday?
Yeah, like
Okay.
with my family around, my in-laws around, like other adults, responsibly doing it. And I just
You weren't like at the club, Michelle?
No. No, I still like to go to bed early, which is why day drinking was my thing. But I still always had a bit of fogginess the next day. I was still carrying a little bit of extra weight after my son Griffin was born. And so I finally was like, let's just see kind of how it feels if I reduce how much I have. And I feel really good. And I'm not saying I'm never going to drink again, but it feels really good. And this is the thing, and you can relate this back to all things nutrition and fitness. Is like building that confidence that I can do this and I can make progress will make me feel like I can do other things. Like I'm now like, okay, now what do I want to do to continue to raise the bar? So I mean, right now I don't feel like I have major struggles.
That's awesome.
Which like even
Do you have like even little minor ones? Like I'll give examples of mine. This is like something so simple, but I love giving examples like this because you can always refine, and as your life progresses, your needs progress, or what your schedule is going to be progresses or whatever. I need to switch 2 of my meals because I end up eating a big meal right before I work out. And it's just because I'm refusing to pack a meal to bring here with me. So I end up eating my little, Molly will kill me, but everybody knows I eat my perfect bar every day. So I end up eating my perfect bar and then at like noon, and then eating a meal at like 3:30, 4 o'clock right before I work out.
Oh man.
And the simple solution is just switch those 2 things.
Yes.
And hammer a perfect bar right before you work out. And you're going to feel so much better. And I've done it a few times, but it's like I just need to pack it and bring it with me.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's something small. It's not changing any of what I'm actually eating, but do you have anything small that you're working on or that you would like to change or improve or?
Well, like I said, I kind of already have done that. I've been working on that now. I know that like I'll say trigger foods too. Like I love chips.
Oh my
gosh.
Love them. I know. Same.
So I am very much like.
I told Julian we need a chip cleanse. Not forever, but like, hey, like I'm going a little too hard on the chips right now.
Desensitize yourself from it.
You can see like I'm like relying on these chips when I come home because I'm so hungry. When I just need to heat up my food and eat it. Yeah. But I'm like hammering chips and then heating up my food and eating it.
Yeah. I think for me, I have to I have a lot of like, okay, it's okay to just have a few, like or none. Like so certain foods are that way, but and like I said, I'm in a good place now.
That's good.
But like it's only been recent, and so I mean I think I'm happy to share this with people because I think when people see like you or me or Molly, who are, like people who are working with other individuals and on their nutrition and stuff, they think you have it all figured out.
No,
but
you're
you
still
don't.
A person.
You're still a person. You have your own struggles. Sometimes you're in a good place, sometimes you're not. And even like until a couple months ago, I was like, I'm okay with being 10 pounds heavier than I was before because I don't want to give up X, Y, or Z things. And that's just how I was. And then just at some point, something changed. And so, just everything's fluid. And I I don't expect this to stay the same way forever.
Yeah. And I think like just keeping a pulse on it too, like once you, have a few drinks here and there again, like you'll know, okay, like I went from doing it not at all, and then I had, a few day drinks on a Saturday, and then there was a few weeks where I didn't, to like if you get to a point where it's like every single weekend again, you might be like, okay, let's rein it back in.
Yeah.
And I think just paying attention to it.
Yeah.
And again, there's no right amount for any one individual. It's like, how's that working for you?
Yes, absolutely.
And that always just goes back to that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Which I think is great. Well, I'm really excited about all the nutrition stuff that's going to be coming out soon.
Yeah, me too.
We're so lucky to have you on our team. Like, who could have known when you joined and were the first parking member that you'd be so involved? And
I just had to keep harassing you. Let me help you, please.
And we're just so grateful for you. So
I'm grateful for the opportunity to work with you all.
Yeah, thanks for sitting down and I like hashing out, some of this stuff, and I feel like we repeat it all the time, but it needs to be repeated all the time, just how simple it can be and how people can reframe their thinking around nutrition. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, cool. That was good?
Yeah, thank you.